Hello and welcome to the Championship Talk podcast, and welcome to our YouTube mini-series where we are going to be doing an in-depth history analysis of every club in the Championship. And we're going to start with Barnsley, but first let me introduce myself. I'm your host Paul O'Toole, and joined virtually opposite me is my co-host Thomas Falco.
Hello!
So we're going to start with Barnsley, and we thought the best way to kind of cover these clubs is to look at their history, look at the recent history in more detail, because we can't cover 133 years of one club. That would take ages. But we thought we would start. The best place to start would be how the club was formed, and then we would move through to present day, and then look at everything that sort of happens in the more recent history, more in-depth promotions, goal scorers, etc. Hope you enjoy this. This is going to be our YouTube exclusive series, and this will hopefully be getting one out every 2 weeks. So look forward to seeing those, the rest of the Championship clubs covered. So we're going to start with Barnsley. Formed in 1887, so 133 years ago. They play their football at Oakwell, which houses, is a capacity of 23,287 supporters. Thomas will cover the stadium a little bit. But they're a South Yorkshire club. Barnsley has a population of 91,000 and some change population. The town originally was when Barnsley were formed, was a linen town. They were kind of textiles makers. They then moved into the Industrial Revolution got going. They then moved into coal, and that became a heavy part of the area of Barnsley's kind of local economy. Since the 1950s, as of most coal mine areas, they've seen a steep decline in coal mining, and obviously affected the area. When you look at all the mines and the boroughs are now closed, the last to be shut in 1994. Obviously the area of Barnsley, that the kind of surrounding area in terms of football geography, main rivals Sheffield Wednesday, Sheffield United, Leeds United, Huddersfield, Rotherham, Doncaster, Bradford and Chesterfield. So quite a few local rivalries in and around that area of Barnsley. So Thomas, how were they formed?
Well, they, as you've previously alluded to, they were formed in 1887 by the Reverend Tiverton Preedy. They were initially known as Barnsley St Peters, and that was until 1897, because obviously, as you can guess by the name, Reverend Tiverton Preedy was indeed a clergyman. He foresaw the opportunity to work with a population that, well, were eager to start a football team, and it was football compared to other sports in that region were considered even to be a poorer man's sport. So that got him involved with the poorer people, which he was famous for in all of the areas that he was involved in his life going forward. He also secured the land which Oakwell now stands on. They've played there, as you've said, since 1888. That must be one of the longest serving stadiums, like grounds in the world, mustn't it? Really, how long they've played there and not moved.
You think they moved there a year after they were formed?
Yes, and it's incredible to think that, isn't it? It's a very long stand, and obviously a lot has changed since then. It's not the same since then. It's not like our local ground, the Wellesley, with the oldest stand in the world, but that's beside the point. The club
stand.
The club actually owned Oakwell until 2003, but the council purchased the ground to help maintain Barnsley Football Club's league status, as they had fell into administration the previous year in 2002. They also, as well, played in blue until 1904, when they switched to their now well-known red and white colours. A very interesting fact there. They've also had a few change of badges as well. I've got a couple of examples behind me, if you can see. I'm pointing my thumb up there. Then there's the Toby Tykes. That was their one I can remember and grown up with the 90s, and then they've moved to their more traditional one in recent times. Their breakdown in the levels they have been in, we're going to talk about their one season and one season only in the level 1 of the football pyramid. I'm going to refer to it as level 1 because the league have changed names over the years, haven't they? So level 1 is the current day Premier League. They've been one season in there, 76 seasons in the second tier of English football. I think that's a record. Level 3. Yes, it is, and they're a very steady club at that level as well, aren't they? Level 3, 24 seasons, and level 4, they've not been there for a while, but level 4, 10 seasons they've played at that particular level of football. Would you like me to go into the honours
Yes,
of Barnsley
please do.
Football Club, Paul. Okay, Division 1 runners-up, 1996-97. They finished second. I know Paul's going to talk about that in a little while, so I won't go any further. Third tier winners in 1933-34, 1938-39, and 1954-55. They were promoted from level 3 in 1980-81 and 2018-2019, so quite recent, and they were playoff winners at this level in 2006 and 2016. They were promoted from the 4th tier, 1967-68 and 1978-79. They have won the FA Cup once, 1911/1912, when they beat West Bromwich Albion 1-0 in a replay. They drew the initial game at Crystal Palace 0-0 and won the replay 1-0 with a goal from Henry Tufnell. That replay was played at Bramall Lane. They were finalists a couple of seasons before then, 1909-1910. They drew the first game against Newcastle 1-1 at Crystal Palace. Goal scored by Henry Tufnell, so he's been a goal scorer in both their FA Cup final appearances, but they lost the replay at Goodison Park 2-0 to Newcastle United. They've also won the Football League trophy in 2015/2016. I've given up knowing what the sponsorship is now. I think, Paul, you sent me a message the other day saying that was actually the Papa John's trophy now, isn't it?
It is the Papa John's trophy. That did make me laugh.
That they beat Oxford 3-2 in that particular game. I've got a few little records here as well, Paul, if you want me to go through them as well.
Absolutely.
Just to cover the potted history of Barnsley. The most appearances from a player is Barry Murphy, 569 appearances for the club, scoring 2 goals in that, by the way. He was a defender, 1962 to 1978. Bit of an issue if he was a forward with that type of goal-scoring ratio. Most goals for the club was Ernie Hine, who scored an incredible 131 goals in 5 seasons, I believe. I've got written down here, but my pen's run out, so I hope it's over 5 seasons. But he scored 131 goals for the club regardless. The record fee they have paid for a player, joint actually, Georgi Histrov from Partizan Belgrade in 1997 and Mike Sheeran from QPR. They both cost Barnsley £1.5 million. The record fee they have recouped, a long-standing record this, 1998, Ashley Ward was sold to Blackburn Rovers for £4.5 million. That is
when you think some of the Championship players that are being sold, and obviously as we go through the recent history, when we look at the players that played for them, to think that that's still their highest transfer fee received is quite incredible.
It is. But Ashley Ward was a half-decent player. Hard to compare if he'd be better than some of the players Barnsley come through now, but obviously we've done the podcast over now 3 seasons. Barnsley are a team who like to bring players in and develop them and sell them on, don't they? So they don't really command massive transfer fees at the time, but they've had a hell of a lot of good players come through their club over the years. Their longest serving manager is Angus Seed, who was manager between 1937 and 1953. That would be a lifetime now to many. Yeah. I mean, if you get that amount of time in modern day football, you're doing really well, or they've actually forgot that you're employed. But yeah, that's a long time there for Angus Seed to be in charge. In the Premier League era, so when the Premier League has started to now, they have had 21 managers. It should be 22, but Danny Wilson has been manager of the club in 2 separate spells, so I've counted him once. So yes, that is that. And also in the Premier League era, they've had 1 season in the Premier League, 21 appearances in Division 1/Championship, and 7 in Division 2/League 1.
Absolutely. So and the reason we're looking at the Premier League era is because for most people that's when football started, but it also it was the foundation of the league that we're covering. Mm-hmm. So when you think of, and again we're going to go into, part of the history we'll cover is when the Championship was actually rebranded as the Championship. However, you can't get away from the fact that this league has morphed into the league that we cover, and that's kind of the reason why we want to start from sort of 1990, because that's where the kind of the seeds were sown of the kind of the League 2, Division 1, Championship kind of bracket, and that's why we want to cover it. And also, it's probably for newer fans, they probably won't necessarily know going back into the early 90s and the history of Barnsley, because obviously we've got great Sky documentaries like the Premiership years. I'd love for them to do a Championship years, some sort of documentary. That'd be so good. However, that's what we're doing. So in 1990-1991, they narrowly missed out on playoffs to the then Division 1. So they stayed in Division 2. In 1992-1993, Division 2 was rebranded to Division 1 because obviously that was the year the Premier League was founded. So had they have been promoted, they would have been one of the founders of the Premier League. In 1996-1997, they finished Football League Division 1 runners-up and were promoted to the Premier League for their one and only season. They finished second to Bolton Wanderers. Bolton Wanderers finished on 98 points with a goal difference of 47 goals. Bolton scoring 100 goals in that year. Barnsley.
Can I just go back one season? Sorry.
You can go back one season.
Sorry, Paul. This is what it's all about. If we were face to face like the good old days, I'd be waving at you frantically to make my point rather than button over Skype now as well as audio. Yes. I just want to say there was a season where Barnsley finished sixth in the 1994-1995 season, but because the Premier League wanted to be demoted from 22 to 20 clubs, Barnsley actually missed out on the playoffs because only one team went up. And 4 teams from second to fifth were then in the playoffs. That also was one of the greatest playoff games as well. Bolton against Reading. I don't think Reading fans would agree because they finished second that season and should have gone up automatically, but lost to Bolton 4-3, I believe it was in the end. But a little bit unlucky for Barnsley there. Of course, they knew going in that they had to be that one team who, for the one season only, who finished sixth, didn't actually qualify.
And that season, Reading finished second. And were still very aggrieved that they were even in the playoffs in the first place because obviously in many a year gone by they would have been promoted automatically. 96-97, they were eventually promoted to the Premier League, spent their one and only season in the Premier League. Neil Redfern in their promotion winning season. Neil Redfern was their top goal scorer, playing in 43 games, scoring 17 goals. John Hendry also scored 15 goals for them. Barnsley amassed a total of 76 goals, conceding 55, so goal difference of plus 21. They finished 4 points above Wolves, who were on 76 points, but Barnsley were on 80 points. So they were a long way off Bolton that season, but they had a fairly good cushion between them and Wolves and were promoted for the first time in their history to the top division. However, it was a brief stay. In 97-98 season, they were relegated. Sort of stage of the season, they took 4 points from 19 fixtures. Once they were confirmed to be relegated, they then won 4 games and drew 2 in their final 6 fixtures. Neil Redfern again was their top goal scorer. He scored 10 goals in this season, playing 37 games. Crystal Palace actually finished rock bottom of the Premier League that season. So Crystal Palace finished on 33 points. Barnsley finished on 35 and Bolton finished on 40.
Can I just say, before we move on to the next season, sorry, Paul, I was amazed when I looked at the amount of games they won in that Premier League season. They actually won 10 games, and they lost 23. Was it I've got written down? They lost 23.
And drew 5.
So that's, for a team to, looking back from sort of memory, I thought they really struggled and obviously finished second bottom. You could argue they did, but to win 10 games in a relegation season is still not awful. I mean, that's quite bad because obviously they went down. But I couldn't recommend highly enough. I think you can still get it off Amazon and all good bookstores as well. I've got a prop behind me, as you can't see, but you'll see when you put this together, Paul. There's a great book about, if I can point, there you go. It's called The Keeper of Dreams, which is the biography of Lars Lisa, however you want to say his last name. There is a bit in the book about that. He was the sub-goalkeeper who played 8 games, and I think he played in their most famous victory in that Premier League season when they went to Anfield and won 1-0. Ashley Ward scored that goal in the 35th minute. But it's a very good book, a very honest account of a lower league foreign journeyman footballer who come to play a reserve goalkeeper, cushy life, getting a pay packet being a reserve goalkeeper and getting thrown into first team football in one of the best leagues in the world. Couldn't recommend that highly enough.
He didn't play many games though, but he got to play at Anfield.
I think he played 8, if memory serves me rightly, and I think he didn't actually go on to play more. He didn't play a lot of games in his entire career, to be honest with you, but to have that season in the Premier League, even if he played 8 games, he's part of Barnsley folklore. He'll
probably claim that he was paid 8 of the 10 victories. So this season I remember fondly because it was when I first started getting into football. Lived in London at the time, and I first started collecting the Panini sticker albums, and I remember being really excited that I got Neil Redfern because he was one of the only ones I needed to complete the Barnsley section. You know, the Shield and so forth. When doing the history of this podcast, I was stunned that this was their only time in the Premier League, the top division. But yeah, this season holds fond memories for me just because of the time and obviously the age we are. This would have been when we're starting to really get into football, so this was really interesting for me. And as you say, didn't have the most disastrous season, 10 wins. In many seasons that would have been, really quite respectable. The downside for them that season, though, only scoring 37 goals and conceding 82. They were the whipping boys, but they did lose. They lost heavily quite a few times. So they stayed in League One. They narrowly missed out. They got into the playoffs in 1990-2000. They finished fourth that season. In the semi-final, on aggregate they beat Birmingham City 5-2 over 2 legs, and narrowly. They then lost the final to Ipswich 4-2. That final was played at Wembley. In 2002, so 2 seasons later, they were then relegated from League One. They finished 23rd. They were above Stockport County. Stockport County finished on 26 points. Barnsley finished on 48 points. Can you think being relegated with 48 points? It's crazy. Crewe Alexandra finished above them on 49 points. Rotherham also were on 49 points, but on the virtue of a 15-goal better goal difference, Rotherham stayed in the league. In this season, Barnsley conceded 86 goals, scoring 59. Bruce Dyer was their top goal scorer with 14 goals, and then Mike Sheeran then scores on second on 12 goals scored that season. So they were relegated to Division 2. In 2004-2005, Division 2 was then redesignated to League 1. To be honest, explaining this structure of this pyramid is probably the hardest bit of this podcast.
It is very confusing, and I think there's a couple of times there where you've mentioned that you've said League 1 when I know you've meant Division 1. It is very complicated because they've changed the names, haven't they?
They have.
So.
But obviously this happened because the formation of the Championship. So the Championship was then formed, as anyone probably watching this podcast would know, then Division 2, then become League 1, and that kind of settles in from there. After this, there's no more changes until they rebrand it to the Super League or whatever. In 2005-2006, they were promoted as League One playoff winners, finishing 5th in the table. They beat Huddersfield on aggregate 3-2. They then after extra time drew with Swansea 2-2, but went on to win 4-3 on penalties at the Millennium Stadium in Cardiff. A stadium you've been to, actually, haven't you?
Yep, watched the Birmingham Norwich playoff final.
Yeah. Won't say anything more about that. 2007-2008 FA Cup Semi-Finalists. On the way to the FA Cup Semi-Final, they beat Blackpool 2-1. They then beat Sheffield United 1-0. Gets a little bit harder after that. They then beat Liverpool 2-1, which I didn't know they did. Then they beat Chelsea 1-0. Then they lost to Cardiff 1-0 in the semi-final. So great run.
That was the year of the Cardiff-Portsmouth final, wasn't it? That was,
yeah. And in the next season, they fielded the youngest ever player in the history of the Football League. They fielded him at Ipswich Town, and it was Ruben Noble Lazarius. 15 years, 45 days. Can you imagine, Jesus? We were still at school. We just struggled to do our maths homework, let alone play professional football. In 2013-14, they were relegated to League One, having lost 3-1 to Middlesbrough. That season, they finished 23rd again. Yeovil finished rock bottom on 37 points. Barnsley finished on 39, and then Doncaster Rovers finished on 44. And narrowly avoiding the drop were Birmingham. They were also on 44. However, again, 15 goal difference swing in that season. Chris O'Grady was their top goal scorer that season on 15 goals. Then we moved into 2015-2016. Football League Trophy champions. Can't remember who sponsored it that year, but they won after a 3-2 win at Oxford. That was played at Wembley Stadium. That same year, they were promoted to the Championship. Through the 2016 Football League 1 playoffs final. They finished 6th. They defeated Walsall, winning 6-1 on aggregate, and then in the final defeated Millwall 2-1. It was at Wembley Stadium. And then in 2017-2018, they were relegated to League One after eventually the kind of game that relegated them was a 4-1 defeat to Derby. In that season, though, they were really close. They finished 22nd. They were on 41 points. Bolton Wanderers were on 43, so it was only a two point 2-point swing. Barnsley actually had a better goal difference than Bolton that season as well. Finishing 23rd was Burton Albion, also on 41 points, and then Sunderland finishing rock bottom on 37 points. In this season, though, this is the 2017-18 season, the top goal scorers are listed as such. Ollie McBurney, 9 goals. Tom Bradshaw, 7. Harvey Barnes, 5. Kiefer Moore, 3. And though for avid listeners of the podcast, they're players that have featured quite heavily in our podcast. Obviously, none of them still playing for Barnsley at the minute, but when you consider what their transfer fee was, I know some of them players were actually loans, but still, that's quite an attacking force. Probably a little bit young, some of them. 2018-19 promoted to the championships through the automatic places. They finished second. They finished behind Luton. Points tally here quite incredible. Luton finished top on 94 points. Barnsley finished second on 91 points. Absolutely crazy. Top goal scorers in this season: Kiefer Moore 17, Corley Woodrow 16, and last season 19-20 stayed up due to primarily a points deduction for Wigan. So as we already covered, but we will just touch on it. Barnsley finished 21st on 49 points. Charlton then finished 22nd on 48 points. Wigan finished on 47 points, but had a significant points deduction. Hull finished bottom on 45 points. Top goal scorers last season: Corley Woodrow on 13 and Connor Chaplin on 12. Okay, so that kind of covers the history of Barnsley, and they've been in and around the sort of championship area, haven't they? They've got sort of been a mainstay.
Yes, as we said, they hold the record for the amount of seasons actually at this particular level as well. They're a steady team, aren't they? And as I said, I was surprised, the same as you've said as well, that they've only had spent one season in the top flight. You'd have think, looking back, even in the early days, you'd have think they've been in the top flight, but just that one season, and that's something that the fans can remember. I don't know if you can call it fondly, because they come down after one season, but they got some good they got some good results. They are a steady team. They've got a certain way of doing things now, as we said earlier. They like to bring through younger players, and if they can hold on to them, as we've seen this season as well with their new coaching, they replaced Gerhard Strieber with Valerian Ismail. Good start for him as well. So Barnsley are that type of team with a little bit of money behind them, as we're going to go into in a minute as well. They could just slowly eke their way up towards that mid-table, like pushing for playoff places in the coming seasons.
So you're going to cover the new ownership in 2017 who were taken over.
They were taken over, yes, by a whole host of people, really. But the majority shareholders are Chin Lee and the Pacific Media Group, who hold 27.5% apiece. The co-chairman are Chien Lee and Paul Conway. James Crine owns 20% of this group. Nirav Perka is 15%, and Billy Bean has 10% as well. When they were taken over, there was that reference to Moneyball as well, because part of the ownership group has been involved with baseball as well, and they had that specific way of trading, as it would be in baseball. And there's a film about it as well, isn't there, called Moneyball as well. Very interesting if you want to watch that as well. Chien Lee is an owner of quite a few football clubs across Europe, or been involved with quite a few clubs across Europe. He's currently involved with Barnsley, obviously. He's also the co-owner of FC Thun in Switzerland, I believe, who have played in the Champions League. I think they played Arsenal in the Champions League, didn't they, a few years ago, but probably when he wasn't involved then. And KV Ostend. And now, for listeners of the podcast, we were a little bit puzzled that Barnsley have actually sold one player and loaned one player to KV Ostend this season. They've Cameron McGeehan and Toby Sibic. That would be that sort of relationship between the clubs, wouldn't it? I know you want to talk about the link with a world famous player and the club that Chien Lee was involved with before as well, so I'll leave that one to you, Paul.
So previous ownership for Chien Lee was Nice, and he owned the club in the period where they appointed Patrick Vieira as their head coach and signed Mario Balotelli from Liverpool. Now, obviously, recent speculation has linked Mario Balotelli to Barnsley, and there's been some quite anecdotal, that's never going to happen. However, obviously it's a player that he's worked with in the past. Balotelli's a free agent, so you never know. I would say it's highly unlikely, but
just to knock that nail on the coffin, I don't know if it's been confirmed, but I think it's just about done that he's going to Brazil.
Yeah, so it was never really going to happen, but obviously there was links to it, so interesting. But obviously he's no longer in charge of Nice. But obviously, hired Patrick Vieira, worked with some very high-profile players. So,
yes.
Hopefully you've enjoyed that rundown of a brief history of Barnsley Football Club. We certainly learnt a lot by researching for this episode. Next couple of teams we're going to be going in alphabetical order. So next two teams, Thomas, are going to be...
You put me on the spot there. I said off air that was Birmingham or Blackburn, but my alphabetical order is not great. So we're going to do Birmingham and Blackburn regardless.
Yeah, so in a couple of weeks' time, we should be looking out, and obviously, if there's a team you follow, we will be eventually getting those teams. We're looking to have completed this series by the end of this championship season, so that when we get 6 new teams in this league, we can then review them as well. So hopefully you've enjoyed this series. Leave us a thumbs up, leave us a like, and also there is a comment section down below. Anything you want us to cover, anything you think we missed. Obviously Barnsley fans out there, you'll probably be like, no, why didn't you talk about this thing? Well, chances are, one thing, it's been really difficult to research anything past 1990. I think you'll echo that sentiment, Thomas. And the other thing is it's hard knowing what to cover. So absolutely leave us a thumbs up and comment down below. Anything you want us to cover for the next couple of teams, absolutely we will. And that's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from me.
And we'll speak to you on a normal podcast next week, but we'll speak to you in a couple of weeks where we'll cover one of the other teams. Goodbye.
Bye.